Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Imagine standing in the corner while everyone else huddles together, smiling for a picture that's meant to capture a moment forever, only to realize they've deliberately made sure you're not in it. That sting, that gut-wrenching ache of being left out by the people who are supposed to love you most, was exactly what I felt that day. Everyone in my family was gathered in front of the grand staircase at my parents' estate, their faces lit with laughter and warmth. And when I tried to step in, my cousin's hand rested against my shoulder with just enough pressure to push me back as he whispered, "Maybe next time." My mother didn't even look in my direction. My siblings didn't bother to call me over, and my father, who had always been the one person to shield me, was gone, now leaving me with nothing but silence. At least, that's what I thought at that moment. I didn't know that while they excluded me from their glossy family portrait, my name had already been etched in the most important document of all, my father's will, next to a number so large that it would one day flip the balance of power in ways none of them could ever imagine. But standing there, with their laughter echoing off the marble walls and my own reflection caught in the polished glass of a cabinet, I felt like an outsider who didn't belong in the home where I'd grown up. The humiliation of being treated like a stranger at my own family's gatherings seared into me. But sometimes life has a way of writing chapters that don't reveal their importance until much later. That day was one of those chapters, and what followed would change not only the way my family looked at me, but also the legacy my father intended to leave behind. The ride home from that gathering was one of the longest, most suffocating experiences of my life. I sat in the back of my car, staring out the tinted windows at streets I had driven down countless times before, but this time they looked different. Darker, almost foreign. The city lights blurred through the glass as tears welled in my eyes, but I forced them back because crying had become a habit I'd promised myself I wouldn't give my family the satisfaction of seeing. They had taken away so many things from me already: my sense of belonging, my self-worth, even my ability to trust, but I wasn't about to let them take my pride. That night, though, the silence was deafening. I kept replaying the moment my cousin's hand pressed against my shoulder. The subtle smirk on my sister's face as she saw me standing outside the frame, the way my mother adjusted her pearls and looked past me like I was invisible. It wasn't just a photo, it was a statement, one that screamed louder than any words ever could. You are not one of us. What they didn't understand was that my father had raised me differently. Even though I wasn't the eldest, the most accomplished, or the favorite by their standards, he had spent time with me in ways he hadn't with the others. He told me stories about when he was young and poor, how his family had treated him like a shadow, and how he'd sworn that when he built his empire, he would never let anyone in his house feel like an outcast. Maybe that's why it hurt so much, because the one man who had understood me, who had been my anchor, wasn't there to shield me anymore. Every laugh they shared that night echoed like a taunt in my head. Every flash of the camera felt like a knife twisting deeper. By the time I reached my apartment, the humiliation had hardened into something else entirely: a quiet rage, a determination to distance myself from them, not realizing that destiny was already aligning the pieces of a puzzle none of us could see yet. The next morning, an envelope arrived. It was plain, unassuming, marked only with the crest of my father's law firm, and when I slid it open, the first words I read made my breath catch in my throat. To my child, who understands the true meaning of family. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My fingers trembled as I turned the page, and as the words unfolded, I realized my father had left me something far greater than love or memories. He had left me power, the kind of power that only comes with a figure written in black ink at the bottom of a legal document. $15 million. I sat there with the letter trembling in my hands, my father's words etched into every fiber of my mind. To my child, who understands the true meaning of family. It wasn't just a line, it was validation, the kind I had starved for my entire life. He had seen me, truly seen me, in ways the rest of them never cared to. Beneath those words lay the staggering truth. My name, printed clearly, followed by the figure that seemed almost unreal: $15 million. My breath caught, my lips parted as if I wanted to say something, but no sound came out, and my vision blurred with a mixture of disbelief and an avalanche of emotions I couldn't even begin to process. This wasn't just money. This was my father's final act of love, his way of making sure that even in his absence, I would stand on ground that none of them could shake. Yet I also knew what this meant. The others, my so-called family, would never forgive me when they found out. I could already picture their faces, twisted in shock and venom, their polite masks slipping as greed, jealousy, and hatred poured out from underneath. I knew them too well. They had always valued wealth, power, and status above all else. And, suddenly, the balance they had carefully crafted, the hierarchy they had built with me at the bottom, was about to collapse. That night, I placed the letter back into its envelope, sealed it as if hiding a dangerous secret, and tucked it into the locked drawer of my desk. I couldn't sleep, my thoughts racing with images of the confrontation to come. Morning sunlight spilled through my curtains, but it felt dim compared to the storm brewing inside me. A week later, the family gathered for the official reading of the will at my father's attorney's office, a mahogany-lined room that smelled faintly of leather and old books. My siblings lounged in their designer clothes, sipping coffee as if this was a casual business meeting, not the dividing of a man's legacy. My mother sat rigid, her lips pressed in that thin, disapproving line she always reserved for me. When the lawyer cleared his throat and began, the air grew heavy, every syllable hanging like a weight above our heads. One by one, the allocations were read aloud, my brother receiving a trust fund to expand his company, my sister inheriting the vacation homes she adored, my cousins given smaller amounts as tokens of remembrance. Then, at last, the lawyer paused, his eyes scanning the room before settling on me. He unfolded the page that contained my father's final words for me, and as he read them aloud, the room went deathly silent. To my child, who understands the true meaning of family, I leave the sum of $15 million. The words struck the air like thunder. My sister's coffee cup clattered to the table, liquid spilling across the polished wood. My brother's face drained of color before flushing red with rage. My mother's eyes narrowed, sharp enough to cut. In that moment, every mask dropped, and the hostility I had always felt simmering beneath the surface erupted into plain sight. Their laughter from the family photo echoed in my memory. But this time, it wasn't me standing outside the frame, it was them, blindsided, shattered, exposed. The silence after the lawyer's words was almost unbearable, like the moment before a storm breaks, too still, too heavy, suffocating in its weight. Then, like thunder rolling across the sky, the uproar began. My brother slammed his palm against the polished mahogany table, the veins in his neck standing out as he barked, "This is a mistake, read it again." My sister, ever the actress in social circles, dropped her mask of charm entirely, her voice rising into a sharp, venomous pitch as she spat. "There's no way father would have left that to you. He barely even acknowledged you compared to us." My mother, who hadn't shed a single tear since my father's passing, finally spoke, her words icy and precise, cutting deeper than any scream could. This is fraud. He must have manipulated your father, convinced him of lies when his mind was weak." Her eyes drilled into me, unblinking, cold, as though she were trying to erase me with sheer force of will. The lawyer, calm and professional, held his ground, repeating in his measured tone that the will had been verified, notarized, and finalized months before my father's health began to decline. But his assurances meant nothing to them. Because the truth was not what they wanted. It was the disruption of their narrative that they couldn't accept. I sat quietly, my heart hammering in my chest, yet on the outside I remained still, almost unnervingly so. For once, I wasn't on the defensive. For once, I wasn't the one being shoved out of the picture. Instead, I was the center, the axis around which the storm now raged. Their faces twisted in disbelief and fury, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus of accusations. My sister accused me of manipulating our father with sob stories. My brother swore I had somehow blackmailed him. My mother hissed that I had poisoned his mind against his real family. Every word burned, yet strangely, it also healed, because it revealed exactly what my father must have seen: their greed, their cruelty, their utter inability to understand love beyond material wealth. As they tore into me, I remembered nights with my father by the fireplace, when he would sip his scotch and tell me that legacy wasn't just about money, it was about leaving something behind that spoke to who you truly were. Maybe that's why he chose me, not because I was perfect, but because I had listened, because I understood him when no one else cared to. Still, the storm didn't calm. My brother demanded legal action, threatening to contest the will. My sister stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor, her words echoing back, "You'll regret this. We'll make sure of it." My mother simply sat there, her silence more terrifying than her words, because I knew her mind was already plotting, weaving strategies to cut me down. And yet, as they turned their fire on me, I felt a strange, quiet strength rising inside. For years, I had been left out of their photo, ignored, dismissed, belittled, but now the frame had shifted, and no matter how they clawed, they couldn't change the fact that my father had chosen me. That was the truth inked on paper, sealed in law, and burned into my soul. They wanted war. Then war was what they would get. The days following the reading of the will felt like a descent into a psychological battlefield, each hour bringing a new assault cloaked in family ties, but sharpened with greed and malice. It started with the subtle things, a barrage of calls from my brother that began politely, cloaked in a false sense of diplomacy, as he tried to reason with me. "Look," he said on the second day, his voice dripping with condescension. This was clearly a misunderstanding. Dad probably meant to divide that amount among us all. "You were close to him, sure, but 15 million. Be serious." When I didn't budge, his tone shifted. "You know the kind of enemies you're making by holding on to this. We can make this very ugly for you. Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer him. I hung up, my hands shaking, not out of fear, but from the realization that this was just the beginning. My sister, ever the manipulator, went another route. She posted a long, cryptic message on social media about some people exploiting grief for personal gain, tagging no one but ensuring everyone who mattered saw it. Her friends, our extended family, even old schoolmates began reaching out to me, some curious, others accusatory. The whispers grew louder, that I had tricked my father, that I'd isolated him in his final months, that I'd somehow stolen what was rightfully theirs. Lies spread like wildfire, and each one burned another piece of my peace. But the most crushing betrayal came from someone I had once considered an ally, my cousin, James. He had always been the quiet one, the only family member who seemed to treat me with any warmth. He'd sat with me at holidays when no one else would, listened to my frustrations, even defended me once when my brother mocked me at a family dinner. So when he asked to meet me in person, I agreed, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone understood. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where the scent of fresh bread and coffee used to calm me, but that day the air was thick with tension. He ordered tea, I ordered nothing. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, he leaned in, said, "You know, if you gave up just a portion of it, say, 10 million, things could go back to the way they were." I stared at him, stunned, not by the suggestion but by the sheer audacity of pretending that anything could go back after what they'd done. He must have read my expression, because his face hardened, and he muttered, "You think you're better than us now, don't you? You think Dad loved you more than the rest of us. Let me tell you something, you're not the one who stayed up with him when he had those panic attacks. You weren't there when he needed help running the company." His voice rose slightly, and I noticed the other patrons beginning to glance in our direction. "This isn't about love," I said quietly. "This is about legacy. And he chose me. You don't have to like it, but you'll have to live with it." He stood abruptly, muttering something under his breath as he left, the tea untouched, steam still curling from the cup. I sat there for a long time, after trying to process the realization that even the few who had once seemed kind had a price at which their loyalty dissolved. That night, I received an email from my father's lawyer. My siblings had officially filed a petition to contest the will, claiming undue influence, mental instability, and coercion. The war had moved from whispered threats to open battle. I knew this would mean courtrooms, media leaks, and months, maybe years of legal hell. But beneath the fear, there was also something else, a fierce, burning determination. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for my father's memory, for the truth he had left behind, and for the child he had believed in when no one else did. They had left me out of the photo, but this time, I wasn't stepping aside. I was stepping forward, even if it meant walking straight into the fire. Courtrooms are not built for comfort, they're built for conflict, for the slow grinding of truth and lies until one side cracks under the weight of evidence or emotion. The first time I stepped into that oak-paneled chamber, with its high ceilings and rows of cold wooden benches, my stomach churned, not just from nerves but from the sight of my own family lined up against me like enemies in a war. My brother sat in his tailored suit, jaw tight, eyes hard with calculation. My sister wore black, as though playing the part of a grieving daughter wronged by an unjust twist of fate, clutching tissues in her hand, though no tears fell, and my mother, regal as ever, sat at the center, her posture stiff, her presence commanding, whispering to the attorney they had hired a shark known in legal circles for tearing apart reputations. I had my father's lawyer by my side, a man of calm demeanor, his voice steady and reassuring, but even with him there I felt exposed, like a soldier stepping onto a battlefield armed only with a shield while the others carried swords. The opening statements cut deep. Their attorney painted me as a manipulator, a schemer who had preyed on a vulnerable, dying man's emotions to snatch wealth that was never meant for me. He spoke of my supposed isolation of my father in his final months, of secret meetings and whispered promises, weaving a story so convincing that I could see the jury's faces shift with unease. My stomach tightened with every accusation. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, his voice calm but resonant, and laid out the truth, the documented timeline of the will, signed and notarized long before my father's illness worsened. The letters my father had written, full of clarity and intent. The testimonies of those who had seen us together, who knew the bond we shared. Piece by piece, he rebuilt the image of my father as a man of sound mind who had made his choice deliberately and with conviction. Still, the process was brutal. They brought witnesses, family friends who suddenly remembered how my father had once expressed doubt in me, distant relatives who claimed I had changed in recent years, painting me as selfish and cold. Each testimony was a dagger, not because it was true, but because it showed the lengths to which my family would go to erase me. The media caught wind of the trial, and soon my name was plastered across headlines. My face dissected on talk shows, strangers debating my character, as though they knew me. Paparazzi waited outside the courthouse, shouting questions, snapping photos of my strained expression, while online comments tore into me, some calling me greedy, others defending me, but all of it suffocating. Nights were the hardest. I'd come home from long, draining days in court, collapse onto my couch, and stare at the ceiling, questioning everything. Was it worth it? Was my father's love worth this much pain? But every time doubt crept in, I'd hear his voice in my memory, firm and steady. Legacy isn't about what they think of you, it's about what you leave behind. That gave me strength to walk back into court each morning. Then came the cross-exam. I was called to the stand, and their attorney unleashed every weapon he had. He questioned my relationship with my father, twisting my words, interrupting, trying to provoke me into slipping. "Isn't it true," he sneered, "that your father only began spending more time with you after his health declined? Isn't it true," he pressed, "that you often complained about being excluded from the family, and that resentment fueled your influence over him?" I gripped the edge of the wooden chair, my knuckles white, forcing myself to breathe. I looked at the jury, at the judge, and finally I answered, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "The truth is simple. My father loved me, not because I was perfect, not because I was his favorite, but because I understood him when no one else bothered to. He made his choice not out of confusion, but out of clarity. He saw me, and that's something none of you can erase." For a moment, the courtroom was silent. My words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, but real. I saw something flicker in the eyes of the jury: recognition, maybe even empathy. My family shifted uncomfortably, their attorney scowling as though he had lost ground. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back, and I wasn't alone. The truth, though battered and bruised, was on my side, and slowly, painfully, it was beginning to shine through. The final day of the trial arrived like the last scene of a play, every actor exhausted, every mask cracked, every truth or lie stretched to its breaking point. The courthouse was packed tighter than ever, reporters scribbling furiously, cameras flashing each time the doors opened, spectators whispering as though history was about to be made. I sat at my table, staring at the polished wood that had witnessed weeks of venom, tears, and half-truths, my heart thudding in a rhythm that almost drowned out the hum of voices around me. My family sat across the aisle, my brother with his fists clenched, his arrogance dimmed but not extinguished. My sister in another carefully chosen outfit, her eyes darting nervously between the jury and her reflection in the dark window. My mother, who had grown thinner and sharper with each passing day, her gaze still locked on me like a predator that refused to accept defeat. When the judge entered and silence fell, It was as if the world itself held its breath. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable, carrying the weight of decisions that would either vindicate me or strip away everything I had left. The foreman stood, his voice steady, as he read, "We find that the last will and testament of the deceased is valid, executed with full capacity and free will. The contest is dismissed." For a moment, I couldn't move. The words echoed in my head like distant thunder, growing louder until they consumed every doubt, every sleepless night, every cruel whisper. Valid, dismissed. My father's choice stood unshaken. My brother slammed his hand against the bench, muttering curses under his breath. My sister's carefully crafted facade crafta, her mouth opening in disbelief as though the verdict were a personal insult to her charm. My mother simply stared at me, her eyes burning with a rage that was almost inhuman, before she rose gracefully and walked out without a word, leaving behind only the scent of her expensive perfume lingering like smoke after a fire. Reporters swarmed me as I left the courtroom, shouting questions about money, betrayal, and family, but I walked past them in silence, the envelope with my father's letter tucked close to my heart. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Not because the battle had been easy, it had been hell, but because the truth had survived it. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled unevenly. My brother cut off all contact. My sister posted more cryptic laments online, painting herself as a victim, and my mother retreated into her social circles, pretending I didn't exist. The extended family, once quick to judge, grew quiet, some offering hesitant apologies, others staying away altogether. But I no longer cared about their approval. I used part of the inheritance to honor my father's memory, funding scholarships in his name, creating something that would outlive both the bitterness and the wealth. The rest I guarded carefully, not as a trophy, but as a foundation for a life rebuilt on my own terms. And in the quiet moments, when I sat alone with a glass of water by the window and the city lights stretching out like constellations, I realized something profound. It wasn't the $15 million that changed me. It was the journey, the humiliation of being left out of that photo, the rage of being called a fraud, the fire of standing in court and speaking the truth when my voice shook. They had tried to erase me, to push me aside as though I were nothing. But my father had known all along. He had left me not just money, but proof that even the invisible child in the corner mattered. And maybe that's the greatest inheritance of all, the knowledge that I don't need their photos to prove I belonged. My name, my worth, my story were already written in ink, in love, and in a legacy that not even their hatred could destroy.